I'll stay in, huh?
Yeah? Hey, so what we're doing, guys, is on a trolley ride, we're going to go by some beautiful landmarks of Stillwater, and I think we're going to have a bunch of fun. I mean, this bus is pretty crowded, but I think that's okay.
Thanks for the narration, PK.
Yeah.
I like the jump show.
All right, kid, we got a test coming after this. So we're going to test you on how much you hear and how much you understand. It's going to be a grade in your end of your year figures. So be prepared.
One, two, three.
Hey. All right, it all started in Stillwater, guys, in the 1830s and 40s, long time ago. And everything came in and out of Stillwater by the river. But the population of Stillwater in the 1830s and 40s was around 500 people. The population of St. Paul at that time was around 650 people. But 20 years later, the population of Stillwater had soared to something around 16 to 17,000. And it all happened because of the lumber boom that was taking place. And everything came in here until, by river, until 1872 when the first train came into town. And then in 1884, Chicago Northwestern built the freight depot right behind us. That's now the Freight House Restaurant. And that building is on the list of historic places in the United States. But by 1884, we had actually 4 train companies servicing Stillwater. And each one of those companies had their own set of tracks. Guys, back in those days, the train companies did not share their train tracks. So we had 4 sets of tracks coming in and out of Stillwater. 2 right here, where this path is to our right and left, and 2 hanging out over the river on a boardwalk setup. We had as many as 35 trains coming in and out of Stillwater daily in the 1870s and 1880s, spewing up smoke and soot and dirt, and it wasn't a very pretty sight. Over to the right there, across the river, is the great state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin became a state in 1848, and they were the 30th state added to the Union. But before they were a state, this was all Wisconsin territory to our left, over to the Mississippi River in Minneapolis, St. Paul. From Prescott, about 25 miles south of here, up along the Mississippi River to Lake Itasca, the headwaters of the Mississippi, and on up into Canada. It was all Wisconsin territory. But I think you might agree with me that we're thankful they put the border here, because had they not, we would have had another 2 million people over here running around with those silly cheese heads on their head. Now what was happening then was people were coming across North America and they were settling the land. They were cutting down trees as fast as they could find them. And when they got to the St. Croix Valley here, they found the largest stand of white pine trees ever seen. Trees between 130 and 150 feet tall. This park over here to the right and this roadway were literally stacked 2 to 3 stories high with logs, lumber, wood. And in the early years, all that wood went out by water. In later years, it went out by water and by train. And we shipped wood all over the eastern United States and Europe. This bridge over here was built in 1931, and it was built to carry 3,000 cars a day, but today it's carrying over 20,000. We've been trying to get a new bridge now for over 50 years. We're finally getting a new bridge, guys. Down to the right over here. A beautiful bridge, though. We're looking forward to that opening in the next month or 2. And this river right here, the St. Croix River, is one of the cleanest rivers in the United States. If you ever get a chance to look at your computers and look at the configuration where the St. Croix dumps into the Mississippi, take a look at it from satellite. And you'll see the dirty Mississippi coming down one side and the clean St. Croix joining it, and the water swirls. the dirt joins. It's quite annoying to see how dirty the Mississippi is compared to the St. Croix. But it is a beautiful river. It has kind of a reddish-brown tint to it. Maybe you noticed that. I noticed you guys were down by the river earlier. That's not dirt. That's tannin. It's leaking off the logs that have sunk further north of here. Thousands of logs up the river here. And if any of you has a great idea for how to extract those logs out of the bottom of the river, turn them into a usable product, I think it's a little cabin industry ready to be discovered. Now in 1843 we built the first sawmill here in town. It was right about where this Lucky's gas station is in front of us. In 1853 we had the storm that you saw, that mudslide created. Wiped out all of the houses and trees right down through the middle of town here. Flattened that sawmill and filled in all this land over to the right. And this land over here now, of course, is no good for building because it's basically river bottom. But it's perfect for tourist parking and for bus parking. And we had one of the first millionaires in the state here in Stillwater, a guy by the name of Isaac Staples. Had a 2,200-acre farm about 10 miles north of here, where he grew his animals and produce for feeding his lumberjacks. And he built the building on the left over here, called the Maple Island Dairy Building. Today this building is used for various businesses, including this very first co-op winery in the United States, any place, right here in Stillwater. 25 members from Wisconsin and Minnesota. There's about 15 different varieties of wines. Now, P.D. Pappy's over here has an interesting story. P.D. Pappy's was set up about, I don't know, maybe 30, 35 years ago or so. When he first set that up, he would get flooded every year. He still gets flooded every year. But in the first years, what he had to do was take all of the equipment when the water came up through the floorboards. He'd take all of the stoves, the refrigeration, all of the chairs and tables and everything out of the store, out of the business, and store them on the side over here in pods. He did that every year, and that was a real pain in the neck. But finally, he figured out how to deal with it, because now what he does when the water comes up through the floorboards, he just hooks it up to pulleys, lifts everything up off the floor, and as soon as the water goes down, he drops the equipment back down, bingo, he's back in business. Pretty smart guy.
Those are rolling stuff.
Now, Isaac Staples built this sawmill off to the right over here. You can see it through the trees in the 1870s. That was one of the biggest sawmills in the area. And they had a huge shaft went through the middle of the building there, driven by a steam engine on the north end of the building. And he drove as many as 14 saw blades, some as big as 6 feet in diameter. Produced about 150,000 board feet of lumber every day. And I figure that back in those days, that was enough to produce probably 150 to 200 houses. So that was a huge, huge operation. When you saw that one picture of the Isaac Staples house up on top of the hill, that was right behind the sawmill, right over to the left. If you look up there, you can kind of visualize what that house looks like on top of the hill. It's no longer there, but we're going to go by that spot in just a moment. At least you'll be able to see the property from the upper spot there. Now, when Wisconsin became a state in March of 1848, they simply abandoned this side of the river. Then Henry Sibley and his group of politicians met in Stillwater here to figure out how to get Minnesota into statehood. And that's why Stillwater is called the birthplace of Minnesota. Not because we're the first city in the state, but rather because the politicians met here to organize the state. That was in August of 1848. They decided we should have a university, and they chose St. Anthony to be the location. You all know where St. Anthony is? Does anybody know where St. Anthony is?
I do.
Okay? Well, that turned out to be, rather, Minneapolis. And that's where the University of Minnesota is, in Minneapolis, of course. They also decided that St. Paul should be the capital of the state. Even though they discussed Stillwater to be the capital, they decided the capital should be further in state. So they chose St. Paul. However, they wanted to give Stillwater recognition, so they bestowed Stillwater the honor of housing the state penitentiary. And it's still here, guys. Now they met in the McCusick building on the far corner of this intersection, right there where it says black letter book. They met in that building in August of 1848. Minnesota became a territory, and 10 years later, Minnesota became the 32nd state in the Union. Look to your right, you'll see a log jam, where the logs were jammed up 10 miles up the river. I'll talk more about that a little later. Up to the right here, we're going to start first post office on the right. And as we turn the corner here, if you look to your left, you'll see the historic Lowell Inn. Now we call this the Mount Vernon of the West. Notice the 13 columns representing the 13 original colonies. Very similar to George Washington's home on the Potomac River. On the right, the Connolly Shoe Building. That's where they made shoes for the lumberjacks. They made a whole variety of shoes, but one of the shoes they made had spikes on them. And if you got the shoes with the spikes, then you were going to be a river rat, or river pig as they were called. Your job was to be out on the river, jumping around from log to log, sorting the river, sorting the logs, keeping the river all cleaned up. And the lumber baron hired guys that did not know how to swim to be on the river. Can you imagine being right out of high school, getting a job out on the river, and you never learned how to swim?
Yeah.
That might be a shock. But the lumber baron felt that the guy didn't know how to swim. Very, very good. Now all of these houses were practically all of these houses were built in the 1800s. So as you look at these houses, they're all pretty old. They've been around a long time. Isaac Staples had his house right out here to the right, where the shrubs are over to the right. Beautiful house. He had an atrium on there where he had all kinds of palm trees and parrots and all kinds of stuff going on. Beautiful, beautiful property. He lived there until he was in his 80s. He died in 1898, and 5 years after his death, his family, for some unexplained reason, tore the house down, that beautiful house, and then donated the land to Stillwater. Stillwater turned this into Pioneer Park in honor of the pioneers. He used to go to work right down those steps at the bottom of the hill there. And see that hitching post about halfway down there with the steps on it? That's how people got on the carriages back in the 1800s. This house right here was built by a guy by the name of Murray. He came to Stillwater in the 1850s. Built that house in 1857. Just the right-hand side of it as you look at it today. He lived there for a number of years, practiced law. But in 1914, the lumber boom came to an end. The lumberjacks and the lumber barons had cut down all of the trees. They had laid this land completely bare. As you look at this one picture in here, you can't even find a tree in the entire picture. They had taken all of the trees in Wisconsin and Minnesota. Never thought about replanting anything. As a result, the population of Stillwater plummeted from nearly 16,000 to around 7,000. And with it, most of the houses were just abandoned, left to their own devices. But then about 40 years ago, people started coming back to Stillwater, buying up these bargain properties and fixing them up. And down to the right here is where we built the first prison. That was our prison from 1853 until 1914. When they built a new prison in South Stillwater, 2 miles behind us. South Stillwater later became Bayport. So now the prison's at Bayport, Minnesota. This is now a condominium association down here. Turns out they tried to salvage what was there of the old prison for many, many years. But finally, about 45 years ago, a group of kids from White Bear Lake had a party in there one night. And they started a fire. and they burned all of the logs that were sitting there ready to be used for making into a convention center. The whole thing went up in flames, and that was the end of the pipe dream. So now it's a condominium association. And next we're going to go by one of the more beautiful homes in Stillwater. This is the guy that grew up in Stillwater, went to school in Minnesota, and then went to law school, and went to work with the Stillwater Corporation. But later he took a job with the Dell Computer Company, and when he came back to Stillwater to retire a few years ago, he was their chief legal counsel at Dell, third man in command of the company. He bought an old farmhouse up here on the right, brought that atrium in from England, did some landscaping, put a porch on there, put a fence on it. Isn't that a beautiful house, though?
Indeed.
And he's one of our good neighbors because he has donated a lot of funds for projects in Stillwater. Do any of you know the name Jessica Lange? Yes. The actress. Well, she lived in Stillwater for a number of years. Jessica grew up in Cloquet, Minnesota, right outside of Duluth. She wanted her daughter to grow up in the Midwest, get a Midwest education. She bought the Battle Howell Bed and Breakfast on the left here behind this white picket fence. Turned it into a private residence. That's on about 2 acres of land right there in the middle of town. Isn't that a beautiful spot, though? That's where she lived with her family for a number of years. But as soon as her daughter graduated from high school, Jessica moved back to New York, where she wanted to get into the entertainment business, be on Broadway. This is where her mother lived, right next to her, right here on the left. And straight ahead of us there is the Aurora Staples Bed and Breakfast. Oh, by the way, this wall on the left over here was built by the prisoners back in the 1800s. William Sauntry came to Stillwater as a teenager in the 1870s. He started out as a drover, running the oxen and the horses up in the camps. But he worked his way up and became very, very wealthy. One of the wealthiest people in Minnesota. And the word is he used to come home at night and light all the fires in the fireplaces. Then he'd have a few cocktails and go to bed and forget the fires. And on 2 occasions, his houses burned to the ground. Well, when he was building this house, his wife said she loved this house, but no more fireplaces. So he had to get creative. And right before he built this, Stillwater had acquired a coal degasification plant. That's where they made coal gas for lighting the street lamps up and down Main Street. And they ran a pipeline for him up to this building, and he had the very first gas fireplace in the upper Midwest. And if you notice, the roof line between these 2 buildings matches. It's because that was a hallway up there. Down below is where the horses and the carriages went, back to the carriage house in the back. He built this house as his entertainment center. Can you imagine? He had a bowling alley, a ballroom, and a swimming pool in this building right here. And he used to throw the parties, guys. This is a replica of the Alhambra Palace in Granada, Spain, built in the 13th century. He used to throw parties. Didn't you see the movie The Great Gatsby? Well, yes. He threw parties that could have been filmed right here, just exactly like that. That's how he lived. But unfortunately for Sauntry, when the lumber boom came to an end in 1914, he lost his entire fortune. He went broke, took bankruptcy, and on November 7th, 1914, William Sauntry checked into the Ryan Hotel downtown St. Paul in his middle 50s, age 50s. He committed suicide. Over to the right here, you see a red house with a tin roof. I drove around Stillwater last year. I counted over 100 homes in Stillwater alone that have the metal or tin roofs. There's another one on the left. This one on the left has a truly old tin roof on top. This was a boarding house at one point. This is where the lumberjacks used to live in the summertime. Can you imagine living in? That was 3 bedrooms upstairs where those windows are. Those are pretty small bedrooms. Lumberjacks did not need a whole lot of space though. A bed, just room for a couple of changes of clothes, and that was about it. There's another house with a tin roof. And those roofs came about for a couple of reasons. Number one, if your house sprung a leak, and it happened to be during wartime, you would either not be able to get shingles or they would be very expensive because shingles, of course, are made out of oil. And oil is in huge demand during wartime. But also, the tin roofs were a great deterrent for fires. And a lot of houses burned back in those days from the fires and all the smoking and the chimneys that were in all of the houses and the sawmills. Up on the left here is the Aurora Staples bed and breakfast. Now, Aurora Staples grew up as a child in this house right here on the right. This kind of a yellow house. But her daddy made some serious money and built that huge mansion over on the bluff of the hill, 2 blocks to the left, in the 1870s. And then in 1882, when Aurora got married, Daddy gave her and her new bride, her new husband, this little house on the left as a wedding present. Hey girls, it looked like a pretty good wedding present. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
And Aurora had a sister, and I'll show you the sister's house in just a minute. You decide what the deal is. Here's our Andrew Carnegie Library in Stillwater. Now when people came to Stillwater, they always came with their customs, their language, their architecture. They came from all over Europe. We had a whole hodgepodge of folks from Europe, all the different countries in Europe. But when they got here, they found a city of steeples and steps. And if you look to the left, you'll see a bunch of steeples. We had 21 churches in Stillwater in the 1860s. And everybody went to church. Can you imagine on Sunday morning listening to the languages of people talking? All kinds of languages up and down the street. But this church on the left is the Episcopal Church. And if you notice that stained glass window in the back right there, in the middle of the back of the church, everybody see it?
Yes.
Well, about 40, the church was built originally in the 1840s. That burned down, they built a new one in the 1860s. That one got this messed up, and they remodeled and did a lot of work on it in the 1880s and 90s. And they put that stained glass window in there at that time. They had the church evaluated about 30 years ago by a company from New York. Came in and evaluated everything for insurance purposes. And that stained glass window, they said they could not evaluate. It was invaluable. It's a Tiffany glass, stained glass window. One of his first works ever. Very old and very valuable. This church on the left over here, that was the Presbyterian church, built in the 1860s. It's now a condominium. By a lot of houses already. Almost all of them were built in the 1800s. And if you notice, most of them have a porch on the front or the side or someplace all the way, or sometimes all the way around. That's like because people wanted to sit outside, first of all, and second, they wanted to talk to their neighbors. They wanted to find out what was going on in the rest of the world. Can you visualize back in the 1880s, 1860s, sitting in a porch along here, people, hundreds of people walking up and down the streets, going downtown to get their products, get their wares, and then carrying them all back home. And you get tired, you'd stop and chat with people along the way, find out what was going on. Maybe somebody just got a letter from a relative or a friend who was out in Gettysburg during the Civil War. And you'd stop and talk about what was happening politically on the East Coast. That's how you really found out what was going on back east and in the old country. Aren't these houses beautiful, kids? Look at them. They're all fixed up. Practically all of them anyway. Here's this house on the left, neat little paint, but he's got the old clear roof on it still. And I mentioned the Aurora Staples daughters. One of the daughters got that beautiful home back there. The other daughter got this house on the left, right here. I think she got the short stick on that deal. Look at this house. Wow. What a difference, huh? And on the near corner on the left is the Rivertown Bed and Breakfast. Built by John O'Brien in the 1880s. John O'Brien donated the land for William O'Brien State Park, about 10 miles north of here. And each of the rooms in this building, in this bed and breakfast, are named for an author. The suite in the back, if you look down this driveway to the left, it's called the Agatha Christie Suite. And if you ever get a chance to go in there, take advantage. It's decorated just like the Orient Express. Have you read that book? And on the left is another beautiful old home. There ahead of us is a house that I was in 20 years ago, and I thought I was going to crash through the kitchen floor. It was such a mess. But a guy bought that 7 or 8 years ago and started remodeling, fixing it up. He found a picture of the original house as it was built, and he put all that accoutrement, all that bric-a-brac back on just like it was when it was first built, back in the 1870s. Isn't that a beautiful place, though? Little Swedish house on the left. This house over to the right ahead of us there, that was the Johnson house. And Johnson had a sawmill straight across the river in Wisconsin. And rather than go across the river every day and not be able to get back because the bridge was totally unreliable, he decided to build his home right here on the bluff of the hill. And then he got himself a long telescope. And he'd stand out on the balcony out there and watch the operation across the river. And if some guy was sloughing off over there, he'd contact the foreman using Morse code. Tell him to get that guy out of camp. He'd get fired right on the spot. Pretty harsh. The land across the river, though, was donated to the city of Stillwater after the lumber boom came to an end. So Stillwater actually owns the land in Wisconsin, straight across the river there. Hopefully when they get this bridge done, the new bridge, they're going to turn this bridge into a bicycle pedestrian bridge, no cars, and hopefully they're going to turn that into a nice park over there on the other side. Swimming beach, all that. Should be really neat. Looking forward to that. Isn't that a neat house on the left, though? About 30 years ago, a realtor came to the house here and said he had a client who wanted to buy this house and would pay any amount of money, whatever the folks wanted. Any amount, you name the price. The lady of the house said the house was not for sale. A couple of days later, the husband said this house is not for sale. And that was when Jessica Lang paid the store. True story. She wanted to buy that house. She ended up buying the Battle Hollow Bed and Breakfast on the North Hill. Now to talk a little bit about a day in the life of a lumberjack. You're sleeping in a bunkhouse. The bunkhouse was built in the fall. It's going to be used 1 year. Then it's going to be totally abandoned. So they paid no attention to the details. You're woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's pitch black out, freezing cold. You roll out of bed. The good news is, you don't have to get dressed. The bad news is, you never undress for 4 months. You just go to work every day. Haul up into the woods. And you start cutting down those 150-foot tall white pine trees. Cut them down all day long. Trim off all the branches. It's hardly visible if you're sawing those logs. You drag them down to the river to fill in the Stillwater in the spring. You do that all winter long, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. Sunday you rest. You patch your shoes, your clothes. Get ready for another work week. The way they kept controlling the camps was they kept 2 things out. 2 things that start with the letter W. Anybody think what I'm know what I'm talking about? Anybody want to take a guess? Women, you got one of them. How about whiskey? Women and whiskey. Keep it out of here. The root of all evil. Right? All right. Well, we're cutting down trees like this white pine tree straight ahead of us. Can you all see this white pine tree on the right-hand side of the street? About a block and a half up there on the right. Big, beautiful tree. That's what they were cutting down, and this land was loaded with those back in those days. Here's another one on the left over here. Another white pine tree. And this intersection right here, we have 4 different architectural styles. If you look to the right, you'll see a French style with the monsoon roof. On the left, a Swedish architecture. On the far right, Victorian English. And on the far left is a Swiss trolley. Lots of different architectures from all over the different countries in Europe, all over Stillwater. These 2 buildings on the right, these 2 brick buildings were churches originally, and now they are private homes. And the second house on the right, that's Arabic architecture, Arabic influence. And on the left is Italian architecture. And as you turn left here, you're going to see that house that I showed you in that one picture. This started out as a 3-story building. The top floor was a ballroom. They had a fire in the 1930s, and the top floor burned. They just put a roof on it. But look at that house today. It's still a handsome house.
Just like me.
Had 50 windows in it. Can you imagine seeing the windows in that house? And can you imagine it another 20 feet higher than it already is? That house really stuck up into the sky. And ahead of us over to the left was the Salem Lutheran German church. Built in the 1860s and used until about 45 years ago when that was turned into a condominium. In fact, we have at least half of the churches in town today that were turned into condominiums. Have been turned into condominiums as the churches have moved to new locations. And on the far left, the corner ahead of us over there, that was the original courthouse in the state of Minnesota. That was built in 1867 and used until 1967. Behind the balcony there, the courtroom is set up just like it was when it was being used. You can tour this building anytime during the day. It's a free tour. There's a little museum in the front. You can kind of wander through the building. Rather interesting. That memorial there is for people who lost their lives during the Civil War, up to the right. We lost a lot of people at Gettysburg in 1863. And up to the right is St. Michael's Irish Catholic Church. That tower is 180 feet tall. And as a comparison, the tallest white pine tree ever cut down and recorded was 178 feet tall. Gives you an idea how tall those trees were. And over on the left here was the old junior high school. This is now the headquarters for Cub Foods. Cub Foods was started here in Stillwater in the 1960s by the Hooley family. And even though Cub is now owned by Super Value of Eden Prairie, they retain the headquarters of Cub right here in Stillwater. And I love it there is there's not one up there on the bluff of the hill. Why? Because those trains coming by daily, spewing up all that smoke right into your backyard, it wasn't very pleasant along here. But in addition to trains, we had as many as 12 steamboats parked on the riverbank at any given time, loading and unloading, spewing up smoke and soot and dirt and debris. It's kind of a mess. And then the river itself. Look up the river to the right there. Isn't that a beautiful sight, though? And right around the bend there, a little bit further up the river, is where that log jam took place that you saw in that mural. The logs were jammed up 10 miles up the river. It took just under 2 months to undo that log jam. And the way they did it was they tied ropes to the logs and they tugged on them with the boats. And at the same time, they dynamited the log jam. Finally got it undone. And during that time, The poor lumberjacks had no income. The lumber barons did not pay them a nickel if they weren't working. As a result, the churches in Stillwater kept those people alive during that time, fed them and sheltered them. Now the lumber barons did not want to build on the bluff of the hill behind us, but there was one group of people that did want to build there, and that was the riverboat captains. And they built these homes to our left over here, with those cupolas up on top, so they could see the operation down on the river, watch their boats being loaded and unloaded, see which boats were coming and going. And these captains, these riverboat captains, could afford about any house in town, because in today's dollars, they earned around $700,000 a year income. They were well paid. And next we're going to go Chillicothe down Chillicothe Hill, named for the Chillicothe Pass in Alaska. This is also where the kids used to toboggan. Kids would start about 2 blocks up to the left, and they'd come right across in front of us here and go down Chillicothe Hill. So here we go, guys. Hang on. We're going to go down Chillicothe Hill. I hit the brakes hole this time. And on the right over here is Teddy Bear Park. Teddy Bear Park to our right. Donated by that Dell executive and his wife to the city of Stillwater. That was a scrappy, nasty scrapyard when I came to town 32 years ago. But look at it today. Street park though. Absolutely loaded with kids on nice days in the summer. And on the right here is Joseph Wolf's Brewery. The Wolf Brothers came to Stillwater in the 1860s from Switzerland. Now we don't know if they were lucky or smart, but these guys always had beer at 54 degrees and everybody else had beer at room temperature. So on the hot days in the summer, it probably got very busy. And over in the Brick Alley building to the right and on the left-hand side is the Brick Alley building. That's where I had a restaurant for 20 years in that building. And in the middle of the restaurant, it's now Smalley's Barbecue Restaurant, and in the middle of the restaurant is a huge fireplace. And that's the exact spot where there used to be a furnace, big pot-belly furnace. And a guy would stand all day long and shovel coal into that furnace, make coal gas, they'd trap it, and then they use that for lighting the street lamps up and down the main street. And Stillwater gets flooded just about every year, with some greater or lesser degree. Last year, the water was up to this corner right here on 2 different occasions. In 1965, however, the water was up to 3 feet over the deck of the bridge over there. And if you look to your right, you'll see this power post right here with a little yellow and white tag on it. That was the high water mark, 1965. They brought the high school kids from Stillwater High School and some of the prisoners from the Stillwater prison to build a 12-foot high sandbag dam right across the tracks in front of us here. They also dammed up around all of the manholes up and down Main Street. All of the basements were flooded. And the water came up 3 and 4 feet inside the manholes up and down the Main Street. But they did save Stillwater, and I've lived here now for 32 years almost. And folks, I really like it. It's a great place to live. I want to thank you for coming on the trolley with me today. It's been my pleasure to entertain you. Tell you a few stories about Stillwater, and kids, I assure you, most of what I said today was true. All right, you have a great day in Stillwater, you guys. You bet. My pleasure. There you go.
So there's the end, folks, and I think we had a decent amount of fun, and we're now going to go somewhere and eat somewhere, I think so. Isn't that right? Right.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, for narrating.
Yes, narrated the whole thing. It was all me.
Thank you, sir, for the tour. It was great.
We've got Oh, quarter two. So you got 50.